And I actually did go down to Walmart here 2 weeks ago, and it was like at I think it was 6 in the morning. So before I went to work, I checked out Walmart's web page for my area, which I'm in Wyoming here, Cheyenne, and it said they had 22 calibers. Well, of course, I ran down there real quick, and all they had was 9 boxes, and they're only giving out 3 boxes at a time. But
Hmm.
the guy said we haven't seen this for I don't know 3 or 4 weeks, and he probably won't see it again. That being said, most guys are saying it's been a month on order, and I personally I believe DHS is actually hoarding it. That's what I'm thinking.
Well, there's some people that have said that, and I think certainly that may play a part in 223 ammunition and
Sure.
some calibers like that. I think the 22 ammunition is just, I think it's the average person that has just become more concerned as of late and is buying it up. I think that's what we're seeing happen with most of it. And if things continue along the route that they are, I think some of the supply situation will be taken care of.
Hmm.
On a long term, I'm concerned about serialization of bullets.
Hmm.
In other words, bullets becoming serialized, and you're having to, buy bullets by serial number.
Hmm.
And which should just be another way to control who gets what and how many they've got and where they're at.
Hmm.
So I see that on the horizon on the long term. On the short term, I think that the supply will increase a little bit more. So I think it's just a matter of waiting, and some of these are coming a little bit more back in stock.
Sure. Sure. Well, CK, with that being said, let's kind of dive into some stuff that people can, do. I found out, talking to you, you've actually know quite a few things, and I think the wisdom that you have, you can throw out to people out there. Not necessarily saying that we do all this stuff, but it's ideas that, whether we've done it or not, will give people ideas out there what they can do. So, CK, not many people realize that so often we go to the doctor and we end up, going to the doctor for, let's say, a major throat. They say, okay, you got a sore throat. You go over to the prescription goes to the pharmacy and so on and so forth. You end up paying, well, if it wasn't for insurance, probably maybe $200, let's just say. But there's actually a fish antibiotic that you can buy that you don't have to go through that costs a lot less.
Right. One of the things that I've been doing for several years is taking a look at in a collapsed society. If the people don't show up for work because they can't be paid, or some kind of red flag event happens of this sort, what kind of things are going to be hard to get a hold of, and what kind of things can we really put aside ahead of time?
Sure.
And one of the things that occurred to me many years ago actually was antibiotics.
Hmm.
Things, everything from sore throats that you mentioned to anthrax
Hmm.
to plague, Black Death. All of these things are highly treatable with the right antibiotics, but are deadly without them.
Hmm.
Now, unknown to most people, right now it is legal to buy certain types of veterinary supplies, uh, quote, for your animals, which are the same as the human supply.
Hmm.
Uh, for those who are interested, a good example is Thomas Laboratories,
Hmm.
is who makes it, fish mocks. And they make all of the major antibiotics, and they'll label them, for instance, fish pen, which is penicillin.
Hmm.
And it's in tablet form. They've got fish mox, which is amoxicillin. And you look at the tablets, and they'll be exactly, the capsules are exactly like the ones you would buy over the pharmacy for humans.
Wow, amazing.
And you say, well, why is this? Well, stop to think a minute. The manufacturers of amoxicillin are not creating two manufacturing lines,
Hmm.
one for veterinary use and one for human use. They're all coming off the same assembly line for human use,
Mm-hmm.
and they're just diverted for veterinary use.
Sure.
So that's why it'll be the same uh, product on both lines. Now, the trick is you're going to have to get your PDR or a Merck's manual.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you have penicillin in 250 milligrams or 500 milligrams, you need to know, you have to do this with a little bit of education.
Mm-hmm.
You have to know, first of all, before you give anybody an antibiotic, is if they are allergic to it. If there's any possibility of an allergic reaction, then you're going to back up and go with a different antibiotic, a cephalosporin, for instance,
Mm-hmm.
which Thomas Laboratories also make.
Yeah.
And this is all for, by the way, aquarium fish.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the reason you can buy it.
Wow.
And a bottle of penicillin with like 100 tablets, and it might not be but $7 to $14.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, if you get real good at this,
Mm-hmm.
you can actually doctor yourself and never have to go to the doctor for an antibiotic.
And that being said, CK, my wife's a nurse, and so one
Mm-hmm.
of her friends had done that. She had listened to, we had talked about beforehand a while back, or I had mentioned it, I don't remember which, and she actually had went to Thomas Labs. What happened was her daughter did not have health care insurance at all. She had an abscess in her tooth,
Mm-hmm.
and it kind of got big. Well, of all things, she stuck up a pair of scissors up there and to puncture it to relieve the pressure and the pain. Well, that happened. Her whole face got now blown up. Now she's got no health insurance. So she already had this antibiotic. She's a nurse. She gave it to her daughter for 10 days. It went away and never had a problem ever since again. So that I'm just telling people this is this is practical knowledge. It actually does work. Like you said, you do need to know, like to have a manual and stuff. Now, one thing that my wife mentioned that was kind of a good idea is I had to go on antibiotics 3 times, go figure, but it was on different type of antibiotics until I got over this thing. But we kept the bottles, so we kind of knew what they were kind of giving us. Maybe that might be one way of looking at it. I don't know. Keep your old bottles.
Well, one of the things that I would also say is if you ever have refills on an antibiotic or pain meds or anything of that sort, get your refills. Don't throw them away. Contrary to what you'll read in the press, drugs generally do not get old. At the very worst, after a number of years, they may lose a little bit of their potency,
Sure.
but they don't go bad. If you keep them at room temperature, they're good for 10, 15 years. There's not a problem with them.
Yeah.
Now, if you read the media press or you read what's on the bottle, it says, it has an expiration date. Well, that goes back to the same old thing. Why can't you make a car tire to run forever? Well, you could, but then nobody buy any new tires.
Yeah.
So if you want people to buy new stuff, you put an expiration date on it, even if it doesn't expire.
Makes sense.
And that's what happens in the drug business to get you to throw away your old drugs. And, some towns, it really gets me. They'll have these roundups, the police do, turn in your old drugs.
Yeah.
And there'll be people down there putting their old drugs in there and et cetera. Well, what if you needed them later on? They didn't go bad.
Yeah.
Hold on to them. And this is part of, being wise. But going back a minute to veterinary drugs, let me give you a good example. You mentioned a problem with the mouth, teeth, and abscesses, and this type of thing. Penicillin is still one of the first runners that are used with infections in the mouth.
Mm-hmm.
Now, penicillin can be bought in tablet form from Thomas Industries Laboratories for aquarium fish, and you can also go to Tractor Supply,
Okay.
and you can buy in liquid injectable form
Mm-hmm.
for horses.
Wow.
It's completely legal. You don't have to tell them that you got a horse or don't have a horse. You don't have to have any paperwork. You just go in there and ask for it. It'll be refrigerated,
Mm-hmm.
and you'll have to keep it refrigerated. But when you think in terms of prepping and the future,
Hmm.
people out here are putting aside a lot of different things. But suppose you're out there chopping wood with an axe and you chop your leg.
Hmm.
I've got a bottle of penicillin. What's that going to be worth to you?
Yep.
It might be worth all the silver you got.
Yeah.
It might be worth your house, not to mention your life.
Sure.
Now, one of the things about what we're talking about, I think is so great, is these things can be bought now for almost nothing.
Hmm.
And like I've got a complete cabinet full of antibiotics for the future. Everything from penicillin, ampicillin, amoxicillin, cephalosporin, even Zitromax.
Hmm.
All this for veterinary use or aquarium fish. And I have taken these things myself. Uh, I've had no problems with them. I've researched this on the web. To date, I know of nobody that's had any problems with this stuff. But when you are talking about antibiotics, you do need to be wise and you need to do some research to know how much to take.
Hmm.
And if you're giving it to anybody else, I would suggest it be a end of the world scenario.
Yeah.
Because anytime you give somebody something, you can be held liable for that.
Hmm.
Drugs can have adverse effects, which is another reason for a PDR, that's physician's desk reference, and a Merck's manual, so that you can familiarize yourself a little bit with antibiotics, what they're used for, what they're not used for, and how much to give a person. Because, these bottles of penicillin and amoxicillin aren't going to tell you how much to take as a person.
Yeah.
So you need to know these things already, and you're going to have to, use these manuals or the internet, for instance, to find these things out. And if anybody has any allergic reactions to any type of antibiotics, then that's a big red flag. I wouldn't go this route at all myself then.
Hmm.
But if you're not allergic to penicillins or antibiotics, and you like me, I can take anything, and nothing bothers me.
Yeah.
So, I've never had any problem treating myself,
Hmm.
but I do so wisely. And I wouldn't treat somebody else unless it was the end of the world kind of scenario. And a good website that people can go to for a reference is Dr. Uh, I think it's Bloom, and I'll think of the name of it in a
Okay.
minute.
Okay. Yeah.
But there's several survivalist websites out there, even done by doctors and nurses,
Yeah.
that are very good resources.
Yeah. That's it's very good information to know. There was living clay. Have you ever dealt with living clay much?
Mm-mm.
Now we knew somebody that had an abscess tooth themselves, and of course we didn't use antibiotics. And of course it was one of those things that was starting to affect them, and they're like, "Well, I don't want to go back to the dentist and have this fixed." So we heard about living clay. Actually, I've even heard that it's actually even taken gangrene out of like a person's foot and that. Um, so we had them say, "You know what? Why don't you just try this for a day or two, see what happens?" So they packed all this living clay up in their mouth, and it was almost like how it is when you put gum up in your mouth. It was kind of like that.
Mm-hmm.
Within a half hour to an hour, it started feeling better. Within a couple days, it was pretty much all healed, and then they never had to worry about that abscess again. It's just another thing that we kind of found that worked. So we bought. I think you can buy it on Amazon a lot cheaper than you can on other websites, but it's called like Living Clay. You can kind of read up on it a little bit, but it's something that you can actually put in your mouth or even put on a cut or something. It'll help. What it is, it's a drawing. It sucks out the infection.
Mm-hmm.
So, anyways,
Yeah, the website I was trying to think of is Dr. Bones and Nurse Amy.
oh, okay,
And they go around the country and they even give classes on how to suture and that type of thing. If they ever come to my area, I'd love to go to some of their classes they give.
sure.
But their websites